Hello YouTube, as you can see from that opening, the weather outside is absolutely abysmal. I've got the disgusting craft proof cover on the table, so that can mean only one thing, and that's some oil and water macro photography. Now if you do like today's video, it would be much appreciated if you could give the video a like, and maybe also subscribe to the channel so you can see more content from me in the future. Okay, so I've never really done oil and water photography before, but it's always something I've wanted to try, so I've used this weather as a good excuse to do that. Now, what I found is there are a few things that can make this easier, and I'm going to share those tips with you today. So there's a few things that you're going to need to do this. Number one is something to actually put the water in, that you're going to float the oil on top. What I find is one of these glass oven dishes work really well, and the reason for that is, particularly this size, is because of the size, because it's much easier to balance this on something and put something underneath it which will act as the general background for the picture you're taking. Also, what it does is it gives you a good area of like clear glass without any writing, so you can get a good shot of the bubbles, because if you take it where the writing is, the bubbles magnify that and it doesn't look so good. So you need a good clear bit of glass. Okay, so my first tip is to make sure this is clean. So what I'm going to do is, I've got a bit of glass cleaner, so just spray a bit of that on and give it a wipe. And I'm going to do this on the underside as well, and the sides of the inside. And what that does is it just helps me get this as clean as possible, so the glass is going to be nice and clear, but also it's going to take up a lot of the dust and that's settled on this while it's been in storage, because that will tend to float in the water and it floats amongst the bubbles and it looks horrible, and you'll find it quite difficult to sort of clean that up in post-processing afterwards. So rather than spend ages cleaning out hairs and dust, it's better to just get them off to begin with. Okay, so that's nice and clean. Okay, tip 2 is when you get something to stand these on. I've been using cans, mainly for the height and because they're quite easy to sort of use. So what you can see from this is it gives me a good height. There's a lot of space underneath as well, which is partly due to the size of the glass thing, so I can put things under here to act as the background. And it also allows me to get my hand in there easy, so I can manoeuvre things around that are under there if I have to. So that's tip number 2. So tip 3 is you need a good colourful background to get this working really effective. And what I find is if I use a tablet, so what I do is I get an image of something colourful. So you can just search for these, or just do a Google search for these and just search for something like a rainbow picture or just a colourful graphical art image. And what you can do is you can zoom in when it's on the tablet and you can move it around, and you can do this while it's underneath, which is why I like this bit of space here. So there's enough space here for me to put my tablet in. I can zoom in on an image, and while I've got the camera over and I'm taking photographs, I can move this around and I can actually see the effect through the camera in real time. So you can do, if you haven't got a tablet, is you could have some white paper underneath here, and then by using something like this where I've got lights where I've got different colours on, and these can change, you can actually just sort of manipulate the light around the paper to get the effect you want, and then just stand the lights there while you take your images. So that's another option if you haven't got a tablet, but from my experiments I found that the tablet works best for me and how I do this. Okay, so next you need some water. So what I find is, and this is tip number 4, to get the best effect, rather than just having a bit of water in the bottom like that, what I want to do is have as much water in here as possible and make it as deep as possible. And I find I just get better results with that way, so I'm just going to go off, get some water and fill this up to the top. Okay, so that's now full. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set up my tripod with my camera on it before I get any oil in there, so I'm good to go once the oil's in. Okay, so I set the camera up on the tripod. A couple of tips while doing this is, if your tripod's fiddly in that, just move the water out of the way. You can always stand it back up on the cans, and you'll see that I've manoeuvred this around to get the tripod onto the table better and the camera over the water. Also, I've got spirit levels on the back of this, so I know this camera is flat, so the actual lens is level with the surface of the water, so that should help you get a nice sharp image. So just put the amount in that seems to work for you and just judge it through what you're seeing through your camera, and if you like it, go with it. Okay, so I'll just add a couple of spoonfuls of oil now. So I'm set up with the oil in, I'm ready to go. What I find is once the oil's in, you'll find it moves around and settles a bit, but just using the spoon you can manoeuvre the oil around and just get everything moving again, and then that way you can take images. The other thing I do as well is I can actually control my camera via an app on my phone. So what that does is I can then just sit here with my phone. I've got the live view of the camera on the back of my phone. I can see what's going on through the lens, and as everything's moving around, if I see everything moving to a sort of a composition that I like, I just press the button and it takes a picture, and I can just sit here, move the bubbles a bit, take a picture and just keep going, and that works really well. And all the time you're doing that as well is you can take a few images when you've got the background how you like it, and then it's just a simple case of manoeuvring the background around, zooming in, moving it around, seeing how the effects on the bubbles are working, which you can see live via your app, and again then just taking some images again. I mean, you don't have to use an app, it just saves me from standing up and using a live view on the back of the camera, which is the other option to do this. And if you are setting up that way, I would recommend having like a remote shutter release on so you can take the images without touching the camera. Okay, so I haven't mentioned the lens I'm using on here, so I am actually using a macro lens, and that just makes this easier because I can get my camera nice and close to the bubbles and get focused on them nice and sharp. I've not tried it with a long lens for a telephoto lens if you haven't got a macro lens, but what's the harm of trying? You can always give it a go. The only issue is you probably have to have your camera a lot further away from the actual water, because the actual focal distance from the end of your lens to the subject is probably a lot longer on those lenses, but if you can do it and zoom in, it might work okay. Okay, so what you notice from the initial images you get when you've just got the oil in with the water is you get quite a nice soft effect on the bubbles. So the bubbles, they don't really have like a massively defined edge to them, and I quite like this. I quite like how subtle they are, so you just get sort of subtle shifts in the colour, I guess, that's shining through from the background, and I quite like that, and it's quite a nice pleasing image. Now what I'll do is initially I'll set up, and that's how I'll take my images because I quite like that effect, but then once I've done this for a little while and I want to do something different, what you can do is get a little bit of washing up liquid, and if you just put a couple of drops in, this will change things up a bit more. So what this does is, well, I don't know the science behind it, but what you'll end up doing is, as you can see from the images I've taken here, is that the bubbles have a much more defined edge to them, and it's quite easier to sort of get a composition, I suppose, and easier to see those bubbles. So it's just a different effect to those subtle ones. I like both, so I'll spend a bit of time taking some without the washing up liquid in, then I'll add the washing up liquid, and then I'll just repeat the process, taking photographs, moving the background around, changing the effect and seeing what I can come up with. Okay, so that's how I go around taking the images, and I'm not really going to sort of talk about the post-processing too much. The post-processing is fairly simple. I tend to just like up my exposure a bit, make it nice and bright, maybe up the vibrance a little, and add a little bit of contrast, and they're the only sliders I touch. The only other thing that it probably need to do is use the spot removal tool, because what you'll find is you'll get a lot of little bubbles, maybe little bits of dust in there as well, and they can be quite distracting, and they can take your eye away from the sort of image and make it look a bit messy. And it can take a little bit of time if you get quite a lot of little bubbles in there, but it's worth going around with that spot removal and taking anything out that you find a bit distracting. And that's it, that's how I process the images. Okay, so I'm going to stop the video there. That's how I set up to do a water and oil macro session. If you have enjoyed today's video, please do give the video a like and also subscribe to the channel so you can see more content from me in the future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the future. Bye.